Welcome to Snow Talk, the podcast series that brings you in-depth interviews for an insider's look at what makes our industry work. We will be speaking with snow industry professionals about life, about business and leadership in this often challenging and always satisfying industry. This episode of Snow Talk is brought to you by Fisher Engineering. And now, enjoy Snow Talk, sponsored by Fisher.
Welcome to Snow Talk, the podcast of the Snow and Ice Management Association. I'm Cheryl Higley. I'm Director of Education and Content for SIMA. Today's podcast coincides with our State of the Industry survey, which we're going to feature in the October issue of SIMA's Snow Business Magazine. Every year we ask in the survey what snow and ice professionals see as their biggest challenges that will impact their business in the coming year. Labor has consistently been number one for years, but this year, weather volatility made its way up to the number two spot. The changing climatology we're seeing in many areas of the United States and Canada means that business as usual may be a thing of the past. My guests today are all experiencing weather-related challenges, from later starts to the season, shorter winter season, changes in types of weather events that they're facing. So with me today are Bill Butts of Outdoor Pride Landscaping in Manchester, New Hampshire, Bob Marks of EMI Landscape in Eastern Pennsylvania, and Eric Klopfer of EMI near Columbus, Ohio. Welcome, guys. So let's start off with just a little bit about each of you and the changes that you're seeing in your markets. You're all in very different areas of the country. So Bill, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Excited to be on today and chat a little bit about this topic. It's been kind of a topic that we've talked a lot about internally, and quite frankly, haven't really had a lot of answers. Still a lot of questions and a lot of chatter across vendor partners and other partners in the industry. Just how to get on the other side. So excited to be on today. So I've been in the industry this is my 37th winter. And obviously, there's been a number of different types of winters. There's been a number of different types of weather patterns that have transgressed. But I will say that the theme over the last 5 to 6 years, I think I can go back when I first started with Outdoor Pride about 5 years ago, is that winter is now January to March, when it used to be November to late February. So this shift in the timing of it starts later and runs a little longer. So as a company, we're just trying to figure out how to navigate that. And when we talk to our clients, there's a little bit of a less of a sense of urgency to get a contract executed because we've had so many nice fall days around here and the weather is just beautiful right now and everybody's thinking this is great and don't worry, it doesn't snow till January anyway. So there's like a false sense of security that's kind of developed there. So we're trying to navigate that a little bit.
Bob, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, so I'm Bob Marks from EMI Landscape. This is our 40th year in business. Like you said, we're in Eastern Pennsylvania, which is it's the Lehigh Valley, is exactly where we are. And we often get brought up in talks about weather as a extremely volatile area. Before we got on the air here, I showed our average snowfall, and it's a graph of very high numbers and very low numbers. So we are used to the volatility, and I'd second a lot of things that Bill just said. There are lots of questions and much less answers than there are questions on how we deal with this. I agree the shorter seasons are a real thing. Our seasons are shorter probably than, we're in the mid-Atlantic. We don't average a November event on average. We're less than one per year. But December is typically three events, which again is not a lot, but when 3 turns to 1 or 0, that makes a big difference. So total snowfall seems to stay steady over a long enough amount of time. So I'm not sure our winter total is different, but the season length and the types of precipitation we're getting. I think it's a big topic, is not just a shorter season, but what we're seeing. And we are used to sleet where we're at in the mid-Atlantic, but we don't go through many events anymore where it is just pure snow. We're either dealing with very heavy wet snow or often sleet, freezing rain, pure rain in the middle of it. That makes extra challenges on how do you clean that up versus just 6 inches of some powdery snow that you push around and go home. So Yeah, it's an interesting topic that affects the life of every snow fighter pretty intensely.
All right, Eric, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Eric Klopfer. I'm also with EMI Landscape, but different environmental management, incorporated out of Columbus, Ohio. We're in the Central Ohio market. I can piggyback on everything they've really said. The December snows have dropped off. We were just talking about this morning in one of our operations meetings that we remember snow and Halloween, trick or treat, right? When we were kids going and trick or treating through the snow, and now we're mowing the second week of December for the past 3 years, right? So we're changing a lot of things operationally of how we operate. Contracts are different. It's not just on the snow side, but on the maintenance and install side. 28 mows isn't 28 mows anymore. It needs to be 32 mows. You're not getting through a season, so it doesn't just affect that, but all around staffing and how you're going to get your labor, how you source your labor, how long do you keep your labor. That's a big topic for us. Yeah, we're down. Past 3 years, our average is normally over the 100 years it's like 30 inches. We've been about 18 inches on the average 3 to 5 years, so significant drop off. And again, like the other gentleman said, it's really January, February at this point. Some March, but we've been finished edging by February the past 2 years. We've been mulching and planting the past 2 years in March.
Some of the things that you all mentioned, kind of in those intros, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about. So, Bill, let's get started with you. You're on the business development side. With all of this, how are these changes impacting how you sell winter services? And how are you communicating with clients about these changes that you're seeing?
So it's interesting. I think a lot of what we do, at least with my team, is not so much selling into the customer; it's educating the customer. So it's just been another piece of our process that we have to bring to light with the customer. These younger, first generation property managers, very, very little experience with observing weather, other than is it going to impact their camping or their skiing or their beach day. So when you start telling them there's a snowstorm that's 48 hours away, they're like, what are you talking about? How do you even know that? So we spend a fair amount of time when we do engage with a client and educating them on how we track weather. And a little bit of that is, to Bob's point, is the weather has been different. Salt, de-icing has become, a major part of our operation. And just coaching them to the needs of having a good vendor partner that has the ability to act and react at a moment's notice. We can all say we'll be ready. We can all say we'll be around the corner. We can all say the trucks are loaded, but in reality, they aren't. So to maybe level expectations, help them understand that, we're going to keep the property as safe as we can. That's why liquid de-icing has become a big, element of our, in our tool belt. So, I think it's in general, it's just, helping the property managers understand the business. It's something that we do pretty organically. We kind of just get up in the morning and go to work and think that everything we know, everybody else knows, but it's not the case. So we have to take a step back, and I spend a lot of time with our account managers and our sales team just saying, don't assume that words that we use are industry terminology with them. They're like internal terminology for our business. So you have to be a little bit more cognizant of their education and their level of knowledge with the snow and ice industry. So that's been our approach, is to just teach more, and hopefully they learn and get on the same page, and then we can make decisions together.
A SIMA best practice is, you should be getting your renewals in the spring. Is that impacting and having everything signed by September? Are you seeing that is still a possibility? Do you follow that, or do you get that pushback from your clients that because things are starting later, there's not that urgency to really get things signed and buttoned up?
A couple of years ago, we kind of instituted a policy like 3-year minimum contracts are really our only option. There are, anomalies where we have to go 1 year and, 1 year, then 2 or vice versa. But, 3 to 5 years is really where we're pushing right now, just because of that exact thing. We don't want to have to retool our entire business. But it's also interesting. We've signed, probably 20 to 30% more contracts over the past 2 years, but it hasn't snowed. So we don't really know the capacity of what's going to happen. I mean, if it snows 28 inches, we could have the capacity for maybe another 150 sites, but we don't really know that yet. I mean, we can estimate it, we can gauge it, we can do all the things, but customers react differently when it actually snows. Sometimes they tell you just to stop after, certain amounts, like don't come. And other times it's like, oh no, we actually want more services. We want to add more. We want somebody on site full time. Well, that changes a whole route, right? You lose a whole crew to a site and you got to find another one. So the renewal piece, I mean, there's not a lot of pushback really on our end, from our end, because like I said, the winters have been kind of the same. So they understand that, hey, like we have to get this in. If not, you don't get what you get on the site. There's been enough here to make it an emergency still. But, I know other markets have gotten, like, you mentioned earlier, 4 inches last year. And, that's not enough to make people urgent for anything. So again, we have to educate them why we're doing this early. Well, we got to retain equipment, materials, purchasing, it's a re-education of our client. And we've noticed that over the past couple of years, we've got clients we've had for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years that we're going back to and saying, hey, this is EMI. You may not have met us. The people might be gone now. We know you're a loyal client. You've been here with us for 30 years, but this is why we do certain things and this is how we do it. So we do lunch and learns, and essentially it's a re-education of why you're using EMI as a partner. And that seems to push it along a little bit quicker too.
Bob, anything you're seeing on your side in terms of the selling season or what you're hearing from clients?
No, everything that Bill and Eric makes a lot of sense. I think the key point there is education. I mean, it's educating the clients. We have clients right now that they have lost that urgency. Last year, we got 4 inches of snow. They could have had no snow contractor, and except for a couple refreeze, they probably could have got through the winter. So they really, what Eric said, with new property managers, we see property managers come from out of the area. They don't know what a real winter looks like yet. So that urgency, we've had to re-educate ourselves on how to educate the clients. And COVID did that as well. It was very easy when I could, when I was selling and I would go out to a site and I'd meet the property manager there and we would talk. And that doesn't happen as much or as easy as it used to. So how are we educating them through email, through phone calls, getting them on site when we can? But it takes a little more work now. But that education, I think, is where you start. Otherwise, they don't know what they don't know. And it's our job to teach them that.
So, Bob, contracts in this industry are notoriously unforgiving, especially on the snow contractor side of things. Whether it's later starts or, you mentioned that you don't really get many snow events anymore. Have you changed any contract language to insulate EMI, or were you seeing contracts coming from your clients that are showing maybe a difference in what has happened in the past that are impacting how you negotiate those contracts?
Yeah, contracts are the number one topic in my area after last year. Seasonal type contracts versus per inch or per push. Seasonals were not that common in our area. It's been a push. Our percentage is much lower than we would like to have of seasonal contracts. And as far as what's coming from the clients, I've actually been pretty disappointed this year from larger clients that write their own contracts. They are more unforgiving than ever, where the topic of conversation on our end is, how do we work together so that you can have the best service and you can have the companies that give that service, let them be successful so that it's good for everybody. To give a little bit of background on what we do is we do large industrial snow. We have clients that, have 3 or 4 pieces of equipment that are only for them. We've made it clear that if you want that there, and as Eric said, staged in October, November, that costs a lot of money to be prepared. So how do we share that risk of being ready so that if the early snowfall comes, or, we always talk about here, February 2021, we had 47 inches in the month. We had 27 inches in 24 hours. And you want us to be prepared for that, yet we have to be prepared when we get no snow. So contracts, it's the non-glamorous part of snow, right? When you think of being a snow fighter, it's the loaders, it's the liquid de-icing, as Bill touched on. Yet you could be the best snow fighter with the best equipment, and if your contracts don't cover you for when you're 30 inches over the average or 30 inches under the average, it's very important. it's the make it or break it. And as I'm a second generation business owner of EMI, but I'm only in 2.5 years as the owner. I've got a lot to learn on how we structure contracts and what's our balance. So it's something we work on every year to be fair and to educate, once again, the clients on, I'm not just taking more. I'm trying to find a balance so that I can provide you the service that you're asking for.
Eric or Bill, anything?
I'd agree with that. We instituted, about 3 years ago, which is about perfect for that time, some startup fees. We didn't have a lot of startup fees in this market at the time. Same with the fixed fee. We're much lower in percentage of contracts than we'd like to be with fixed fee and, seasonal, same thing. But there's also not a lot of contracts in the market here that are fixed fee. So again, you're now educating the client of why this will work. We put in safes on both sides. We put in floors and caps, right? If it snows under 10 inches, you get a rebate. If it snows over this, we go to per occurrence. So kind of everyone's protected there on the anomaly years. So I think overall it's getting some traction. I mean, people are seeing it. I think it's just going to take a lot of time. Again, it's education for them. But I think the startup fees is a big one. Sometimes they deny it, but it's like, okay, well, then we'll get there when we get there. We're not going to have our stuff on site. We're not going to put a bin on site, But a lot of them understand it, especially the long-term clients, because those are really your partners that you want to be with anyway. So
one thing that we had some success with, the listeners might pick up on this, is we brought in what we considered a senior property owner / executive to talk to our team about what he feels the benefits, pros and cons are of certain contracts. And he was super candid about, no, that's okay. You guys should be doing that. You guys should be charging us. And I think it opened up the eyes of our business developers to not be afraid to ask that question. I think there's always an intimidation factor when you're getting into a new relationship or a prospect. You don't want to tip over the apple cart with the wrong question, right? You want to stay in the cool kid seat, right? And you start asking off questions, and all of a sudden there's that relationship. You only get one chance to make a great first impression. So they tend not to ask the questions, and then a day later, 2 days later, you start following up with questions, and how quickly that client gets back to you. So Pete is a good friend of mine. He came in and spoke to our team, our sales team, and our account executives, and just gave us some green light stuff to just do. And one other thing he told us, which was really cool, was to be sure as a contractor, understand what the cost of a landscape or a snow contract costs in the square foot percentage of the property. In other words, your landscaping and snow contract could be only 18% of his overall cost of that property. So when you start looking at percentages and you start saying, well, we need 1 more percent, that doesn't feel terrible, and it doesn't feel terrible to him. So, if you're thinking about your contracts, if you're looking at a $200,000 contract and it's based on a $200,000 square foot building, that's a pretty easy, value to understand and to articulate to your team. So we've been working on that a little bit. That was a big win for us this year. I mean, our contracts, we do have a lot of fixed fee contracts up here in Boston and New Hampshire. New Hampshire's, 75 inches of snow average. So there's a lot of risk for a building owner or property owner up there at 75 inches. So they're trying to protect the top end. So they do like fixed fee because it gives them budget security. And we just help. We ask some tough questions. It makes, at some point it makes them feel a little uncomfortable. But at the end, I think they like that we ask the questions is, how much do you budget for snow? I mean, I don't know why that's such a crazy question, but I mean, if you want to work with us, and you have $100,000 budgeted for snow, you might be undervaluing the cost to deliver this snow safely and efficiently. And if you are, we want to help you figure out the right way to budget correctly, so nobody's really at risk. So budgeting and asking tough questions and listening to property owners and property managers has been, on the contract side anyways, has been kind of a win-win for us.
Eric, you're in a market that might not be considered a traditional snow market like the Northeast, although I don't know if there is a normal snow market anymore. From a winter preparation standpoint, how are you adjusting to the changes that you're seeing? Like you said, you still have to be ready if it's 2 inches of snow or 20 inches of snow or 200 inches of snow.
We're a bit of an anomaly as well because we're lucky enough to have a large construction installation side. So we have about 40 pieces of equipment that we own, as far as loaders and excavators, wheel loaders. skid steers. So luckily we have that work. As far as prep goes, come November 1, November 15, all of our equipment was on site, ready to go. Some of the stuff was, held back at the shop in case the construction crews had to work. But now it's to the point where we don't even put them on the site, unless it's a contract requirement until the night before, day of. I mean, we're working, we're planting thousands of trees in December right at this point, November. So there's, it's a lot of shifting of equipment. Luckily we have the work to keep it busy, but really as far as the rest of the prep goes, I mean, you still got to have the salt, you still got to have the liquid set up. We're still putting the brine stations out. We're still prepping all the equipment. So, again, the startup fees help us, offset some of that cost, but it's, really negligible to think about if you don't actually get snow. Also, with prep is also preparedness, right? And route running and planning the routes. Like, you want to get out there and do the routes, but you got so much other work to do because it's 65 degrees in December instead of 20 degrees, you got to break off to find those right times to train and do the routing. And
I think the most common question I get asked by people outside the snow industry is, have you seen the forecast for this winter, the long range forecast? And they're like, oh, they're saying it's not going to be a high snowfall winter. That doesn't change our outlook at all. So as far as preparation, it's the same because it only takes one storm that you need to be prepared for to make or break you. So similar with the timing, if we have less December snowfalls, that doesn't mean we have zero. So that prep is the same. The challenges we face is that, we use a lot of seasonal operators for our heavy equipment, and we used to train them in November. Well, now we train them in November and we plow for the first time in mid-January. They're no longer trained. You go 2 months on a job site that they've never seen before. So we're finding we still have our first training at a certain time. And then we set intervals that if we go X amount of time with people not coming out, they're due for retrain. And even just reorientation with the site. They may know the equipment, but it's a new site for them. We're training. It's like, let's train late November, early December, and we're good for the year because we're out every 4 days. That's no longer the case. And it's something that we felt we almost got caught with over the last couple of years where, when I say February 2021, we had a storm in December and then nothing from mid-December till February, no plowing at all. And then when we plowed, it was for 30 inches of snow. And there was a little bit of reorientation for the beginning of that storm that we should have done in January. And that's a lesson we've learned, and we're trying to adjust our training cadence and schedule for that.
To add to that, I think we're fortunate. Mark, our owner, is, pretty focused on the time it takes or the team is pretty focused on the time it takes to get all the equipment ready and the inventory that we have for winter only equipment. So we did make a commitment about 3 years ago to put, I think there's 3 people in each branch, mechanics / laborers, working on snow equipment year round. So all summer they're pulling sanders out, they're pulling, sidewalk equipment out, and they're tuning them up, cleaning them up, and parking them ready. And then we have a meeting once a month all year, a snow meeting, to talk about readiness. And I think a lot of the readiness, at least on our side, the fear is getting the equipment to the sites when you're ready, when it's tuned and ready to go. So we just found out the other day that our winter equipment is all ready. Any contract that we have a signed agreement for that's in a multi-year, it's being staged right now. I mean, I think literally like this weekend, we're staging snow equipment. So that feels kind of cool. I think it helps the operations people's stress level. The branch leaders and snow ops leaders, they feel good when they can go out to their snow site and have that first walkthrough and see a couple pieces sitting over the corner. Our stuff is typically bigger, more chunkier, where it's dedicated equipment per site. And I think the client feels that too. I think the client gets a sense of security when they see a piece rolling in. So that's been, for us, that's been a strategic move. In the last couple of years, probably 3 years now, we've been focusing on working on planning year round.
We're going to take a quick break to hear from the sponsor of today's podcast, Fisher Engineering. We'll be right back.
For more than 70 years, Fisher's been building snowplows and spreaders for waymakers, the ones who lead so others can fall in line, the ones who refuse to back down even when the snow is piling up, the ones who make plowing look easy, not because it is, but because they're that good. Forged from steel but made in the New England snow, our roots ground us. They're also what drive us. So to all you waymakers out there, know we're out here too.
Welcome back to Snow Talk. Again, I'm Cheryl Higley, Director of Education and Content for SIMA. We're back with Bill Butts, Bob Marks, and Eric Klopfer talking about climatology changes and the impact on their snow businesses. Bill, you mentioned that your company services a 100-mile stretch from New Hampshire to Massachusetts. It's hard enough trying to navigate all of this with just one climatology issue. How does that further complicate the changes that you're seeing?
Yeah, it definitely puts a different perspective on the term readiness and timing. We put a lot of ownership on the area managers to be leaders of their own climate or their own zone. They should come to a meeting prepared and have a sense of urgency. If snow is imminent or temperatures are imminent in their market, they're one tip of the 100-mile market and the other is completely different. We expect that those managers come to that meeting with a different sense of urgency. Our southern market certainly could be a little bit less aggressive at staging loaders. We stage from north to south. Obviously, it makes sense to do it that way. But there is a point where the southern managers say, I don't want to wait till November 15th for my equipment. I want it now. I want it, So there's a little bit of a tug of war game going on with the snow ops managers, getting their equipment and their sites set. But we do put a lot of ownership on those managers. I mean, they are a manager. They should be able to understand weather. They should be able to predict, to their ability, when they really need things by and what their drop dead dates are.
Bob, what about you? You're in the Lehigh Valley. I have to imagine that there's big fluctuations in that market.
Big fluctuations, absolutely. And with those mixed events, Pennsylvania is often voted the worst roads in America because we sit on that freeze thaw line so much. So I was looking, when Bill says he's got a 100-mile span, we have about half that. But two of our main service areas are only 25 miles apart. Yet in our area, that can be two totally different storms. Where our shop's at versus one of our sites that one of our main areas, like I said, is 25 miles away northeast of us. And it can be, rain in one area, 4 or 5 inches of snow in another area. I think Bill put it very well that putting that onus on the managers, giving them the power to say, hey, what I'm doing in this region isn't the same as the others. They get to own that and find the right people. And our team loves it. We have a bunch of weather nerds and, we're looking at radars and temperatures and ground temps. And the more they get to make those decisions, they understand the difference between, where I'm at in Macungie versus where they're at in Easton and the north side and south side. So, 50 miles for us, it's a lot of east-west, but that little bit of north-south we deal with and our elevation changes, it's a challenge that I think we probably have 4 or 5 microclimates, even though we're not in nearly as big of a range that Bill deals with.
It's interesting you said that, because like we said, we're like 30 miles, surrounding Columbus. So, we'll go, 60-mile radius roughly, but it gets split almost in half north and south by I-70. And you could have 6 inches, the 10 minutes north of 70 and rain 10 minutes south. So, we have service locations, obviously, in all those locations or those areas. And we understand, hey, nothing's happening here. Let's move these guys over here, right? It's a lot of shifting of people and shifting equipment. Obviously cameras help with that. We use a lot of cameras now, technology. But again, the guys know, they're talking all night. Hey, I'm backing off 10 crews. Do you need them in the north side? We got to go do condos or apartments because it's getting 3 inches. We got to do sidewalks. Let's shift all the labor over here or move loaders and, shift brine equipment or whatever it may be. But yeah, it's, it's fun. They like it. So it's good that they like it because to love snow, you got to be a little strange. I think that's probably why we're all here.
Let's talk a little bit about that technology that a couple of you have already mentioned with the site cameras coming on. Bob, I think you mentioned that you use 2 different paid weather services. Obviously the days of just looking out your window or watching the evening news are done, but how are you using that technology and how are you finding maybe savings by using that type of technology that makes it worth that investment?
Honestly, I think we're probably a little bit behind the cutting edge on technology. We're aware what's there. We do use two different weather services, and they're great. We use two just because we are on that freestyle line. It's nice. I like having data. I like making decisions off of data. And during a storm, sometimes if you're making decisions, you feel out on your own. And every once in a while, just getting input from a weather service makes me feel like I'm not in it by myself and I have a little bit more data to deal with. We use ground temperature sensors, nothing fancy. We have some that are on trucks that are just there all the time and dashboard display. But, we just found good infrared that our team can use anywhere just to shoot the ground and see those ground temps, because we'll have plenty of storms that it's 30 degrees and snowing hard, but we still have 34, 35-degree ground temp, especially on the south side of buildings that's been in the sun all day. I know there's a lot of emerging technologies with site cameras that can tell you ground temperatures. They're getting to the point where they can tell you snow depth. It's something we're strongly considering for different regions. But I think the technology is there. It's getting there. And if we don't start implementing some of that soon, we'll be behind the times, but it'll cost us money. And maybe more importantly, it'll cost us sleep. And we all need that in the wintertime. So that technology, I think, can really save you from from going around when you don't need to or being behind when you shouldn't be.
Eric, Bill, either of you?
We had an opportunity at the SIMA conference this year to see some of that technology up close and personal. And to me, it's been something that I've seen coming down the tracks or, being developed, but it always seemed it was cost prohibitive to even consider it. Would the customer pay for it? Would there be a return on investment, and how quickly would that return show up? So we've kind of been sort of playing the same game as Bob, just kind of waiting and wondering. And we got a couple that we're going to be doing, a couple of clients. We actually approached a client and see if they would split the cost with us, and they would. So that's something to think about. If you want to invest in a camera and you really think that it would help your business, you might approach the client like we did and say, this is something that we want to be better at it, but we don't know as if it's completely, our cost to bear. And they did split it with us. So that's going to be interesting. So we're going to have a couple of units this year for the first time, and we'll see where it goes. I think it's obvious that technology changes everything we do, decisions to results to, risk management. If we can use it as a tool in our belt, I'm all for it. And the cost, the amount of companies that are getting in the business is helping drive the cost down, which is good for the snow and landscape snow fighters.
I'll piggyback on that. I agree that it's always been a little cost prohibitive, but I think it's coming down significantly with some of these other companies coming out, which is great. The other piece I'll add too is that, if we're not taking this to our clients, the camera companies are going to go to your clients. It's already happening across the country. They're going to the large, very large corporate companies, and they're saying, hey, let's put these cameras on your site, and you can then dictate, when service is going to happen, and obviously that's not really a partnership we would like to work with. I mean, it's okay as long as they're educated in why we're putting the cameras there and why they need to be there. But if we don't do it, someone else is going to. But it's also interesting too. Obviously, we're doing a lot of large construction and even maintenance. These cameras aren't just for winter, right? That's, and then some of the equipment stuff I was going to talk about later is, we're buying equipment that can be used in multiple different facets of the business, not just snow, because it's only snowing for 2 months. So we've got to find some other equipment that can be utilized that's effective in all different facets of our business as well. But with the camera, same thing. You can see what's, progress on job sites, construction sites, even maintenance sites year over year. It's a marketing exposure you can use as well. So, but I think it's coming this way. I mean, the cameras are real. There's other technology pieces too with, liquids and brines, as they all mentioned. Everybody's using a lot more liquids. And for us, it's better for the environment. And it's also, it's faster and it's safer, and it's just not, we're not just making it up, right? Again, it's the education piece. This really works. Here's the history. Here's why. We do test plots for them and show them how much it'll save them over time and the cost of the building repairs and all that. So the technology is not just in, equipment. It's also in, the liquids you're using and the types of materials you're putting out.
You are all in markets that are seeing, more mixed events or more ice. With people trying to, I think we're finally seeing people get on the liquids. I don't want to say bandwagon, but they're finally getting there. It took them a while to get there, and now they're getting thrown with ice and mixed events and all of this. How do you use those effectively, I guess, in those type of situations? Does that concern your clients at all who, especially in some areas, they want to see that salt on the ground that shows you've been there and that it's working?
Yeah, I mean, we've been kind of leading the pack on liquids. We put a pretty good emphasis about 8 years ago to start the process, and I think we're at probably 30% of our clients right now. We have probably about 200 commercial clients are 100% liquids on walks and roads, with the exception of a granular treatment, weather conditions, pavement conditions. But I think the opportunity to introduce liquids to your client is an opportunity to add value, to create a sustainability initiative, reducing salt and corrosion damage to their infrastructure. They're all facility people. They all manage the property, both from a, service contract to a structural, repairs and maintenance contracts. If you tell them they don't have to redo their walkways every 5 or 6 years because brine will reduce salt damage, they're listening. And the other thing that we did strategically, Mark did, is we don't charge anymore for brine. It might cost us more to apply it and implement a brine program, but we feel like the savings is kind of negligible not negligible for us. I mean, there's a bigger investment, but we can use less granular products. So there's a little savings there. And, I'm not giving away any trade secrets. It's just the way that we've decided to go after some long-term partnerships. If we tell them brine is better, but it costs 25% more, they're not going to use it. It's just a fact. So we kept it neutral, and they're using it, and they're allowing us to use it, and they're seeing the results. So it's been our kind of foot in the door just by keeping the cost neutral, and it's worked.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Again, we also, kept our costs very similar, almost 1-to-1. And I think we have probably 80% of our clients. I don't think there's any that will say no when we do it. There's, when we're talking condos, HOAs, everything at this point, that was a big, all of our commercial and our industrial and our retail were always fine with it. They bought into it when we started, the big push on this, but then it was the condos, the HOAs. And that's really, for time savings, if we can get that down, that's the last person I need to get to anyways, but it's going to buy them some time. Right. So it's educating them on that, on the pre-treatment, the post-treatments. But you talked about the mixed events, right? So that's difficult. I think every event we had last year came in as rain and then turned to snow. So you're not putting it down, you're not using it, but we do utilize it for post-treatments. And like you mentioned, like people want to see the salt, they want to see that. But again, if you're educating them, like, hey, this is going down as a post-treatment. You're not going to see it, but it is here, it is protected. It's an education thing. It's, sometimes you got to show them video. Sometimes you got to just do video of it and give it to them. And this is what we're doing out here. This is what we're going to do every event, but here it is. This is what we do. All of our people have been fantastic with that. The other piece I don't think Bill hit on was the janitorial piece. We talked about the whole building maintenance, but one of our clients has found is like, oh my gosh, you guys have saved us 1, headache from the janitorial people, 2, costs, and 3, people aren't slipping and falling as much on rocks in the entries of the building. So that alone has been one of the biggest things that property managers really were ecstatic about along those lines.
I think we have to be careful. I think when people get into brine, we could make this a whole nother podcast about liquids and snow removal, and I'll try to keep my part short. I agree on all those points. And I think where we deal with so many mixed events, same with Eric, we get so many events starting as rain, or it's going to rain a day before. You talk to companies in, Minnesota, and their post-treat, if they go a little heavy, is their next storm pre-treat because they're not going to have no rain in between. We brine. We don't have any clients that are 100% brine. We aren't there yet, but we are challenging ourselves this year that just because there may be some rain at the beginning, does that mean we can't start with liquid? So we're going to have some test areas. We've got some unoccupied buildings, some unused areas that we will be using to see, Salt gets eaten up by rain too. So how much salt are we losing down the storm drains anyway? If it's going to be a little bit of rain, or can we get anything down ahead of time? So we're challenging ourselves this year that just because we're not going to have straight snow, does that mean we can't do anything? Does it mean we have to do granular, or can we still find a way with certain application rates, certain additives, certain seasoning the pavement, as they say? Can we use liquids more than we've given ourselves credit for? Because the benefits are there. So let's see what we can do.
Just one more thing to add to that, the buzzword that we came up with, and I think, again, I'm not opposed to sharing this with the CIMA group, is we've kind of created a statement that brine provides safer surfaces sooner and longer. And as soon as you start saying safer surfaces sooner and longer, it feels like it's a risk management question or an answer, I guess. And we've gotten really, really great results with people saying, yeah, I want to do it. I want to have it. I want to use it on a campus. I want to be on the brine train. So that's just a little buzzword we came up with, and it's, feel free to use it.
When we first started the conversation, I talked about, in our state of the industry surveys, availability of quality labor is always number one. How do the changes that you're seeing, how does that impact your staffing, whether it's how many part-time people you hire in the winter, or how do you deploy them? When do you deploy them? Bob, you mentioned the training already, but you have to have the people to do the work. How is any of this impacting how you staff?
Yeah, the training is one part of it, but the timing of hiring seasonal staff. When we're hiring equipment operators that, their job sites will be shut down when it snows or they're laid off, that's a little bit easier to deal with. But if we're hiring seasonal people just to work on our sidewalk teams, hiring them in early November that we expect them to be there 2 months later doesn't work. We'll still take referrals early from our existing staff, obviously touch base with last year's seasonal. But if there's no snow in the forecast in November, we're not having a big push for seasonal sidewalk staff members. The training, like we talked about, the number of staff hasn't really changed, but deploying them is harder than ever. With the mixed events, are we going to do we need anyone out? Do we need just our year-round staff? Do we need all of our seasonals? Do we want every referral possible in? Those mixed events, is it going to accumulate or is it going to melt? That weather volatility has just made the decision-making slightly more challenging, which is, I think, what keeps us up a lot is when do we go and how many people do we go with is a challenge. And when we started this in the beginning and we said we have lots of questions and less answers, that's one we still battle with on a, per event basis. And it's something we've worked with the contract side that if there is, when we go to sell, whether it's a seasonal contract or retainers or any clauses in there, it's something we try to educate our clients that, we could have a forecast of 1/2 inch to 3 inches with snow accumulation of 0 to 3. A 1/2 inch to 3 inch is such a massive difference. 12 to 15 doesn't change much. So we've tried to educate our clients that if you're not willing to pay a certain amount for us to be ready, we can't provide you the service because we're plowing 1 inch of snow, but 1/3 of an inch of snow with warm pavement, we're barely doing anything. So we've tried to educate our clients that if you want us ready, there needs to be a way for us to recoup our costs to be ready and deploy our staff and not be hesitant to say, hey, our 140 seasonal workers go. We don't want to hesitate, because the second you hesitate and it's the wrong time is when people get hurt. So, I'm sure the listeners have heard us say educate the clients now 30 times, but with this challenging environment of the weather and everything else, it is that education that allows us to be protected to make those decisions on the staff.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing I was going to say too with the staffing, like you said, the number hasn't really changed. It's when, because finding sidewalk staff hasn't really been that difficult. It's just when you get them, because like you said, if you get it 2 months before, they're not going to be there the next month. They're going to go find something else to do. They're going to move on. And then it's also actually using them, right? These signed up with you. You've essentially committed to them that you're going to use them for the winter. And if it snows 1 inch and you don't use them, they're not coming back. They went to somebody else down the road, right? They've moved on. And then also the full-time staff is, they want to be working as well, so you have to, it's a balancing act all the time of like, okay, like, who's going to work on construction this week? We have maintenance stuff to do. Is there, training we can do? That's another piece too. Usually the first couple events are like, we bring everyone in regardless, just so they're ready. They know they're good to go. They understand what's going to happen, whether it's a dusting or 4 inches, but everybody comes the first few events just so they understand the cadence and how things operate.
Mm. The ability to hire and retain quality individuals year over year hasn't changed. It's probably been the same, but I think what has changed is the sophistication of the equipment. The old 950 cat loader that pushed snow straight forward and scooped up was, that's no longer. You got a hydraulic wing, $300,000 loader. I mean, the quantity of experienced operators has dropped. So that's a challenge that we find, is going out and finding, we hire loader operators and then tell them they got to run a 1224 Max Pro in the front of it. The guy, he goes white. He doesn't know how to run it. Doesn't want to run it. Give me the old straight box, and I want to run a straight box. And we're like, no, this is going to be the machine you run. So we've taken an initiative to think about our staff and our teams and our clients, and the bigger clients that we have that are fixed contracts. We try and commit to having over half of those employees are full-time employees. So they've been in discussion. They know the client. They might have been on the campus during landscape season. So when they get there, we want our field supervisors, our summer supervisors running Ventrax, because the Ventrax will save so much manual labor. And there's a pride factor there too. A full-time employee will take better care of your equipment. So having a seasonal staff that supplements 50% of a full-time staff makes a lot of sense, because it's kind of like a sports team. The veterans can coach the rookies type thing. So we've been working that, and the culture is there too. I think the full-time employees have another level of pride for the client and the things that the client expects, and they can coach up the other team members. So that's been an initiative we've taken. It doesn't always work. There's just not enough fixed price contracts to go around. So it has to get creative.
I feel like we just got this conversation started and we're out of time. So anything else, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I mean, the biggest thing I'll say along the staffing line is, we have to keep the people that we want to be here. We've got to keep them working. So I think we have a benefit in our side where we do a lot of construction. We're able to shift people over or do seasonal layoffs, and we have return to work bonuses and things like that. But without them, it's difficult. There's, we have technology with robot mowers and things like that we're looking at, but we haven't found the robot plowers yet, right? Or the sidewalk equipment that's robots that are going to supplement your workforce. But so I think that's the biggest thing to remember in a lot of this is, even though it's not snowing, it's going to. I think we looked at over the past 100 years, every year there's been 2 lower total snow seasons than the average. Then the following year is going to be average or above. So it has been less snow, but do we know that that's actually going to continue? We don't know. We're going to find out here probably this year and the next year. So I think that's my biggest thing and you have to have the people to do it. So keep pushing along and keep those people happy.
Bob, how about you? Any closing thoughts?
This might be slightly different than how we've been talking about things, but what we found after such a volatile winter, and I talked with a lot of other contractors in the area, and I found one of our greatest strengths was our mentality to stay positive. We've got staff that, I plowed in Denver before and I'm not used, I want 90 inches of snow. We had a mantra this year that nobody plows water better than snow contractors in the Lehigh Valley. We plowed a lot of slush, and just having that positivity, on a daily level, on a seasonal level, it's probably pretty obvious that, when we get 4 inches of snow, and I told you we don't have as many seasonal contracts as we'd like, our cash flow isn't as good as normal years, but we're not going to complain about it. We looked at saying March 1st landscape starts. If we get snow in March, it's solely a bonus. But we looked at our balance sheet, we looked at our cash flow for the year and said, we're going to sell the heck out of some landscaping. And yes, it's not going to look as good as it did in 2021 when we had all that snow, but it can look better than, at the end of the year, it can look better than it does today. And just moving forward, and that positivity, I think just keeps people engaged. And I think as anyone listening to this podcast, whether it's your role as manager or leader in the title, if you're listening to this podcast, you're clearly a leader somewhere in your organization. And that positivity has really brought us through some tough times.
Great point.
Well said. Well said. I think for me, I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with people in the industry, both clients and employees. And I found the biggest benefit to get some of the tricky questions answered is to ask. Ask the clients, ask the employees what they think. How do they think they might be able to do it better? Be amazed at some of the things that they'll say that they would be, empowered to offer their opinion and then actually follow through with it. We've been asking a lot of questions. We've been spending some time this summer with asking employees, little fireside chats, whenever the employee cookouts are or whatever. It's like, what do you think? How do you think this winter's going to go? Are you going to be running a site? Is this going to be is it going to be your winter to step up? And, you just ask someone that question in July, they got a couple months to get their mind right to possibly do it. Same with our clients. We ask our clients, if you could wave a magic wand, what makes a perfect snow and ice management company? Just sit there and listen. They're going to tell you exactly what they want you to do. If you're not already doing it, figure out a way to do it because they just told you they'll hire you if you could do that. And the last thing is communication. Just an exceptional focus on communication. We've been good at it. We're trying to get better at it.
Appreciate the time today. Thank you again for being here. Thanks to Fisher Engineering for sponsoring today's podcast. And we will see you next time on Snow Talk with Sima. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for Snow Talk, sponsored by Western Snowplows. We hope you enjoyed it. Check out the latest episodes of Snow Talk, including any you may have missed, at www.sima.org/podcast.